All right, we are gonna get started in about 1 minute. All right, let us get started and we'll let the others catch up. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Marcia Ellison. I'm president of the NAACP Fort Lauderdale Broward branch, and we are going to have our much anticipated legislative debrief. We certainly believe in education. We believe in information sharing. And in order to do that, we have to know what the facts are. We're going to talk a little bit about the process because a lot of us have come in on the end of the process, which is never a good thing. But we want to make sure that we know exactly where we are today. I'm sure that you've heard what the session was and how terrible it was, and how, as we were saying earlier, how much praying that the senator and everyone had to do in this year's session. And so with that, we're going to ask for opening prayer. Judge Holmes, if you will assist us. Our Religious Affairs Chair, Minister Edwards, is out of town.
Thank you, Madam President. Let us pray. Father, I thank you for your many blessings. We thank you for life. We thank you for health. We thank you for our strength. God, we thank you for the legislative process that we have undertaken. And God, I just know that beyond a doubt that you have kept our senator and our lobbyists in the center of your will. You've kept them strong. And God, I ask you now, because I feel a shift in the air, that you would let us realize that the government is upon your shoulder. And all we need to do is just rely and trust on you. But as they go through the process, God, and they're in the room where it's happening and nobody's listening, God, I ask you to keep them encouraged. Let them not get weary in well-doing, for they shall reap if they faint not. And keep them strong and in the center of your will. And then lastly, God, help us as people to listen, to become educated in the process and how the legislation is affecting us. And then, God, I ask you now to let your word come forth in the state of Florida, that the people rejoice when the righteous are in power. We ask you now for your many blessings upon our president and upon all that are listening in, and for all those that will listen to this tape at a later time. Keep us in the center of your will. Keep us safe and under your arms and under the secret place. Hide us, God, from the enemy. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Judge. We will start with self-introductions. We'll start, and since Judge, you were already speaking, we will go ahead and we'll save our guest for last.
All right. Well, you know what? I feel the least of many to start this, but good evening, everyone. My name is Alona Holmes. I'm a retired circuit judge here in Broward County. I'm a life member of the NAACP. I serve many capacities, whatever the president tells me to do, and if there's a need, that's what I do. So I'm a woman of many facets, and I need a lot of prayer, but thank you.
Vice President Brown. I'm sorry, President. Oh, excuse me.
She had a slip. Good evening, everyone. Tony Brown, President, Indian River County Branch, NAACP. As always, it's an honor to be among you powerful freedom fighters, and hopefully we can disseminate some great knowledge tonight.
Thank you. And Attorney Pamela Burch-Fort.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, President Ellison, for inviting me to participate. Judge Holmes, thank you for that prayer. I can't tell you how many rooms I've been in when no one was listening, and it is discouraging. But I do feel the winds shifting as well. But I am Pamela Burch-Fort. I serve as a legislative consultant to the NAACP. I have just completed my 45th consecutive legislative session. I don't know why that is, but nevertheless, it has been a pleasure and an honor to serve the NAACP. And like so many of you, though my role is legislative consultant, I do whatever the president and the many presidents, the 64 of them, ask me to do. So there's a lot of work to be done, and it has been my pleasure to serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burch-Fort. You know, working with one or two of us is rough, but about 64 of us is extra. And last but certainly not least, our own Senator, Reverend Dr. Rosalind Osgood. Dr. Osgood.
Good evening, Madam President and all the esteemed guests. I'm Dr. Rosalind Osgood, a proud Broward County native and proud life member of the Fort Lauderdale Broward branch of the NAACP. And it is an honor to serve as the Senator for Senate District 32. And as we hear the rhetoric, I want to ask us to adopt this slogan for Senate District 32. It's not my initial words or original words, but it reminds me and it keeps me going. Struggle and sacrifice is the price we pay for freedom. Struggle and sacrifice is the price we pay for freedom.
Thank you, Senator. And so we're going to get started. So we've seen a lot on the news. We see bills that are going that are being signed, and we see the media circus and it's going around the state of Florida. So can we talk a little bit about the process? We know where you all are going to tell us where we are now with the bill. So I know that people like to go up and take pictures doing Broward Days, and then they like to go and they show themselves having a little press conference, and you know, it's a few days before session is ending. Can you all tell us what the process is and when does it or should it actually begin? Okay, Pamela, go right ahead.
Yes, we know that we have a 60-day legislative session. The time changes and it can confuse people. In even years, the session begins in January, and in odd years, the session begins in March. It was a time when session was simply held in April and May every year, except for redistricting years when it began in January. And the reason it was moved to January in even years is so that we adjourn in 60 days, which means we adjourn the 1st of March. It gives legislators more time to campaign and to raise campaign cash. This is a year that we did not yet have a special session. We did not have an extended session. So legislators are at home raising money and readying for the election. I want to talk a little bit about the playing field that we operate in. After the 2022 election, the GOP now holds what is called a supermajority. And they hold a supermajority in both chambers. While we've seen supermajority status in one chamber or the other, it's the first time we've been and seen a supermajority in both chambers simultaneously. In addition to the legislative supermajority, the entire supporting cast is a Republican. Every statewide office holder is a Republican. Both United States senators are Republicans, and 6 of the 7 Supreme Court justices are Republicans, with one defined as a moderate. So if you get the picture, you know that the legislature can do whatever it wants to do. and it can do it whenever it wants to do it. And although we have rules of procedure that specify when bills are heard, what happens in a committee, what goes to the governor, how it goes to the governor, the supermajority can waive those rules at any time and do whatever it wants to do. So if it wants to pull a bill out of committee and hear it on the floor, even though the rules say that's not the way the process goes, it can do that. And it has done that in the past. So I want to say there is a process. We all try to work with that process. But given the playing field that we're on now, sometimes that process really doesn't count. In terms of when the legislative session starts, yes, the regular session has an opening day and it has an ending called sine die, but the legislative process is ongoing. It never ends. The budget is passed and it goes into effect on July 1. The next budget starts the next day and we start working on getting ready for the next year's budget. Bills have to be filed. We always encourage people to get with their legislators to work on bills for the next upcoming session. So the work is ongoing and the process is ongoing. Senator Osgood works as part of that process, and she has some unique perspectives because she is the person in the center of that process. Senator Osgood?
Thank you, Ms. Ford. You know, I think it's very important that we have these conversations. Thank you, Madam President, and thank you for your constant connection throughout the legislative process. It's hard being 400 miles away from home. It is good when you have leaders who are paying attention, who are bringing things to your attention, who are talking through bills and perspectives with you. It makes you stronger as a legislator. One of my hardships of being in Tallahassee is when you drive 400 miles to Tallahassee to see me and other legislators during legislative session, and we only have 2 to 5 minutes to spend with you. And sometimes you get offended by that and you don't want to meet with staff. But once the session starts, we're in a whirlwind of a schedule, from committee meetings to sitting on the floor. So we have to be in place to vote. We are home now out of legislative session. We all have a district office. My district office is in Tamarack. A lot of you just do what you do. You just kind of show up at my house, but I'm always available. But we need to talk about bills and ideas before the legislative session start, before committee week start. The House can file 6 to 7 bills. In the Senate, we can file as many bills as we want. But each bill through a normal process must have a House sponsor and a Senate sponsor. And based on what the bill is, the bill might make its way through 3 committees, or it might make its way through 4 or 5 committees. I have the honor of serving on both fiscal policies and rules. So any bill that has money attached comes through fiscal policy. Any bill that is going to change a law in some kind of way comes through rules. If you file legislation, the committee chairperson can make a decision whether the bill goes to the floor or not. In the House of Representatives, our Democratic House members are not allowed to chair or co-chair committees. They are known as ranking members. In the Senate, it's a little different. I actually am the co-chair of the Community Affairs Committee, and we have several other senators that are Democratic that co-chair committees. But it is a process. And if the chair does not want to hear the bill, then your bill is not heard. So you have to work really hard communicating. You have to help other people to understand that you're there to represent your constituents. You have to talk about issues and people over petty political perspectives. Because at the end of the day, we've all been elected there to serve the people in the state of Florida. But it is a tedious process. And when you file a bill, it goes through drafting and it comes out in a form. There could be several amendments, several iterations to the bill. So if I file a bill and you don't like something and enough people email and say, take that out, that doesn't work, then I have an opportunity to do that as the bill moves through committee. What we deal with a lot of times is a bill that's filed, and when it gets to the last committee, maybe a couple of hours before, there's a strike all amendment that's filed, meaning that it's a total new bill in many components that you haven't had time to read or research. So you have to pay attention to bill language, what's been amended to bills, what's been taken out of bills. And it is a technique that you learn. I just completed my second full legislative session. I felt very good about my and my staff's ability to follow bills. I think in the Senate, it was like 990 something bills filed on the Senate side and over 1,000 on the House of Representatives side. And about maybe 350 to 400 of those bills were actually heard and dealt with in a 60-day legislative session. And I think it's important that you understand that if you have a complaint or concern, all legislators have district staff. My district aide, Ruby, is in my office when we're in Tallahassee in the session, always there to help you with a state issue. And thank you, Madam President, for starting with the process, because I think it's very important. If we're going to play the game, we got to know the rules to the game and where to engage and how to engage if we could ever be serious about putting the ball in the basket.
And so if we are interested in truly making a difference, we come to Tallahassee. If we want to come for more than just photo ops, how then should we, when and how should we do that, Ms. Burch-Fort, Attorney Burch-Fort?
We suggest that you arrange to come to the session, the earliest part of the session, maybe the second or third week in. Many groups come up, they're there for more than one day because it takes some time to move around through the session. But there's much work to be done before you get there. It's calling the legislators, getting a feel for their schedule. Sometimes it is easier to gather in one place and invite the legislators to come to where you are to give a presentation rather than members trying to track down legislators and visit them in their office. Find out what is on a committee schedule. If a bill that you're interested in that's going to be heard, try to get there to sit in that committee to hear that bill being heard, or to designate members of your group to make presentations to that committee about the bill and your feelings about the bill, or the impact that that bill will have on you and your community. But there's a lot of work to be done, again, before you arrive in Tallahassee. We have held rallies, and during those rallies, legislators have participated. Senator Osgood participated and spoke at several of them. And that is where a lot of information is conveyed. That is where collaboration begins, because there are often several other organizations present during those rallies and gatherings at the Capitol. And it takes a lot of collaboration amongst groups to move legislation forward. There's no one group that has the ability to singularly impact legislation. So coming to the legislature at an earlier point, getting a hold of the bills that you have an interest in so that when you do go back home, you can adequately follow those bills, meeting with legislators to let them know what is in a bill that is favorable to you and your community and your concerns, and particularly those things that are devastating and will have a negative impact. That will give legislators an opportunity and time to work on those bills. So that would be my suggestion, especially with the NAACP considering coming to Tallahassee and perhaps hosting what we call lobby days.
And Senator, I think I heard you say start your office is staffed and available for people now. Don't wait until we get to Tallahassee to try to get on your calendar. I know that although I must admit, I tell everybody that you're my senator, like nobody else's but mine. But I do know that staff does you do take appointments and information. And so you're suggesting that we just start now and start doing the work and contacting your office with ideas and concerns.
So I'm just me. So I don't always follow the philosophy or the protocols because of my values and belief. The property in Tallahassee, the capital, is our property. We're the taxpayer. So if a group is planning to come to Tallahassee and they give me enough notice and they have identified things they are concerned with, I had the pleasure of working with AKA Day at the Capitol, Links Day at the Capitol, Delta Day at the Capitol. I like all the days at the Capitol. I finally got over that Cap Alpha Psi didn't invite me to their day at the Capitol, but that's all right. I bet that won't happen again. I'm still a little salty about that.
I heard they sent you flowers though.
They did. But I try to arrange a space in the Senate building for the group to meet. I try to get my colleagues that are sponsoring bills or having to hear bills to come in and talk to those groups. The one thing that we have to change, I love to see you all the time, but we have to talk to people that are not in the same party as we are, people with different perspectives. If you're not educating other people about our lived experiences or our views and perspectives, don't just assume they're gonna go read it and know, or see it because you posted on your Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter page. We have to be in the habit, especially in a supermajority, to talking to everybody. So that's what I do. If groups get their dates, I would actually suggest that they come during committee week, because during committee week, we have more time to spend with you. And then you can come into committees and testify and speak to bills and speak to those things that are concerning to you that are on the agenda. It's not, session and everything just constantly moving, but you have an opportunity. I will also suggest that you have some type of one-pager, that you email the one-pager and you bring a hard copy to drop off in people's office. Because if there's a particular legislator that you didn't talk to, you can always give them the one-pager. What I see oftentimes happen is a lot of people come and they go to the House side only. It's bigger, it looks more glamorous. It's 40 senators. And the bills have to pass both chambers. And, I get into it with House members all the time because they say we have, equal power. And I never argue about power, but all I know is they represent 140,000 people in their district, and I represent 580,000 in my district. So I'm doing a lot more work and representing a lot more people, but we try to work together. If you have budget requests from the state, you can go to the state website. There's a specific time that they release the appropriation request form. Nonprofit organizations can apply for those dollars, different entities. You can make your request. And what happens from then is they find the senator in the House member that represents your area, and we have to carry those appropriations. When I left Tallahassee, I was so excited that me and my staff worked through this legislative session across the aisle to get $6,964,000 through the House and the Senate budget, working with Representative Campbell, Representative Dunkley, Representative Gottlieb, Representative LaMarca, and everybody name I called was not a Democrat. But it's the way we have to work to get money back into our area. So these appropriations at some point will go to the governor's desk for him to either approve or disapprove. And it's a lot of needed things like sidewalk repairs in the city of Fort Lauderdale, fire rescue response equipment for the city of Sunrise, an emergency training center for the city of North Lauderdale, money for Old Plantation Water Control District, money to continue to support Forever Families, which is an organization that does foster care and adoption services, money for an athlete mentoring program in Broward County schools. And those are just some of the projects that you're able to apply for these funds for. Let me back up also and add this. Sometimes it takes legislation 2, 3, 4 years to get through. Sometimes it takes an appropriation multiple years. Ms. Burch-Fort, I was kind of taken aback doing some research a couple of weeks ago and saw legislators who were in the legislators for 8 years and never passed the bill. And when I think about what it takes to pass the bill and the work, and you could just get on the wrong side of somebody and they just shut you down if you allow it. It is not an easy process. But as your senator, I talk to everybody. I go to a prayer group early Wednesday morning, and most of the people in there are not in my political party. But your voice and your concerns is going to be represented through me. I'm not going to back down from talking to anyone and expressing how we feel or the things we need in our community. And from doing that, this legislative session, I'm really proud that I was able to get 4 bills passed with the help of my staff. 2 bills we were asked to amend to other bills in the other parties' bills. One of those bills was something that allowed people that live in homeowners and condo associations to be able to vote electronically without going through an arduous process to make that happen. The other bill was to allow cities flexibility with parking requirements when a development is being built in a low-income area that's within, so many feet of a transportation hub. Sometimes developers are developing in our community. The city gives them a lot of requirements for parking. Most of the times we're taking the bus. Those parking spaces could be extra units for housing. Those bills were passed through amendments to other bills. And then there were 2 separate bills, the career theme course bill that myself and Representative Dunkley worked. It was actually a bill she had last legislative session that didn't make it through. And we worked at this legislative session. And that bill will require school districts to inform parents about career opportunities for kids in middle school. It puts a framework in place for kids to now earn industry-based certification in middle school. Like at Lauderhill 6 through 12, they have an amazing cybersecurity, career-oriented technical training program that starts in middle schools, but many people don't know about it. The bill also forces the Department of Education to track the success of these career-themed courses. We love our kids, but we got to start thinking about options and multiple opportunities. We want them to go to college, but if they don't, we want them to have a skill, or maybe they do both because they're just so ingenious like that. The other bill was a bill that I worked on with Representative Tate Edmonds to help ex-offenders that wants to go back to college. When you're arrested now and go to jail, you lose your residency. It's kind of funny because if you're incarcerated, they know exactly where you are. But this particular bill puts a provision in place that you're able to use the address before your incarceration. You don't lose residency status because you are incarcerated. So if you get out of jail and you're trying to build your life and go back to school, you are able to use your previous address before incarceration to apply for Pell Grant and funding, where you can use in-state tuition costs instead of out-of-state tuition costs. So I'm very excited, and I'm very grateful to my staff. We worked really, really hard this legislative session across the aisle to come out of the session with those 4 bills. Now, all of those bills are at the governor for the governor to sign into law. So if the governor comes to Broward County to do the career theme course bill, and you see me on TV with the governor because he's signing a bill that I sponsored into law, don't get side-eyed with me. But if he's going to sign a bill into law that I worked hard to sponsor on your behalf, I'm going to be up in there for sure.
Just give us some warning first. No.
I want to chime in on something that Senator Osgood mentioned. One of the things we have to learn how to do too is how to follow information from the legislature. So many people are not even sure where to get the information from. So I want to remind everyone, you can go to myfloridahouse.gov and find out about bills, find out about amendments, find out about committee meetings, find out who the legislators are, how to contact them, who their staffs are, how to contact staffs. You can go to flsenate.gov, and that's where you find the information about the senators, what committees they serve on, how to reach them by phone, how to reach them by email, who their staffs are, how to reach those staffs. So that is one way of keeping up with information and finding out who you need to see and who you need to talk to. And I'm just going to take a personal privilege here and insert this. Senator Osgood is one of the hardest working legislators we have. And it is phenomenal to see her as a freshman senator accomplishing all that she is accomplishing. I was talking to you, Madam President, one day, and I reminded you that I was sitting somewhere and someone walked by me and they had this very rapid pace and they had these little legs and they were just going and they had on sneakers. And it's like, well, who is that? And I looked up, it's Senator Osgood. So I described her as beauty at the top and hard working like hell at the bottom. She is always in her sneakers and she is always moving and talking to someone because she understands that is how to get the work done. And I don't spend that much time with Senator Osgood. I don't have to spend that kind of time with Senator Osgood. I'm doing what she's doing, talking to people who don't understand what we're talking about, who don't know what we're talking about, and who we might need to move legislation forward. I don't need to see her. She knows where we are and what we're doing. I drop in to make sure we're on the record as supporting her bills, and then I move on to try to get real work done. I introduce her to other people, other groups, such that if she needs their help to get work done, she has access to them. But you all ought to be extremely proud to know that she is one of the hardest working people. And all the folks in the house come over to ask her advice on how to get something done. And she's only been there for 2 sessions. It's phenomenal.
Thank you. Attorney Burch-Fort, you were in constant contact with the units in the Florida State Conference. Let's talk about a few of those bills that you were saying, let's get busy on, let's watch this. I know there's something I believe in particular, and when it comes to anything that has elections or education or those. So off the top of your head, just tell us about a few of those things where you were sounding the alarm to those to let us know it's time to get busy.
Right. We started out the session with a few bills that were very alarming when they were initially filed, particularly the voting rights bill. There was a measure, Senate Bill 1752, that would have done away with vote by mail ballots as we know it. They would have returned to the days of providing an excuse to vote by absentee. You would have to be in the military or out of the country or disabled with a physician's excuse in order to vote by mail. It was extremely concerning to us. I'm proud to say that bill didn't get anywhere. It died early on and it didn't even get a hearing. There were several bills filed that dealt with hand counting of ballots. We know that if anyone starts hand counting ballots and there's a human element involved in that, a whole lot of hanky-panky can go on. That bill, those bills, it was 3 of them, did not get anywhere. A bill that we have defeated in the past, we've defeated again this year, was a joint resolution that would have increased the threshold from 60% required to pass a ballot initiative to 66.67% to pass that initiative. It was heard in the House. It was the 7th consecutive year that Representative Roth has filed this bill. It got support in his committee, but the bill was defeated. Did not get a hearing in the Senate and did not get farther than one committee in the House. There was an elections bill that was filed for the first time, the 7th week of session. Now, you know, the legislative session lasts 8 weeks. This bill dropped in the 7th week. So it was something that no one had seen, no one knew what was in it. It would have returned the state of Florida to a 2 primary seasons. That is something that existed prior to the year 2006. If a candidate does not get a certain percentage in the primary, then they go to a second primary. That was a bit alarming, even though during those days it was very helpful to some candidates. This was filed to help one candidate, i.e. Matt Gaetz, to not be successful in his quest for governor. It also would have reduced drop boxes even more than they are today. We were very pleased that that bill didn't get anywhere. I think it was after 4 days, they capitulated and indicated that this was not the time to discuss or pass a bill that no one had seen. So in the elections arena, I must say we had a better year than we have had in the past. Most of you know that several of the organizations, including the NAACP, did file a Florida Voting Rights Act that we named the Harry T. and Harriet V. Moore Voting Rights Act. We had no expectations that the bill was going to be agended and heard because that's the environment we're in, but we got a lot of traction off the bill. It would track many of the provisions in the original 1965 Voting Rights Act. It was filed by Senator Geraldine Thompson in the Senate and LaVon Bracy Davis in the House of Representatives. So we will be back next year with that bill and the next year and the next year and the next year. It is a bill that we intend to educate around and continue to push forward. We know that we are in an era where voter suppression is running rampant. So this year to come out fairly well unscathed was a bonus for us. We started out the session looking at some gun safety bills. None of the gun safety bills were agended. None of them were heard. They have not been agended and they have not been heard in many years. But the House did hear a bill to lower the age back to 18 for purchase of what is known as a long gun, which would have included the AK-47. It was discussed in the House. It was never agendaed and heard in the Senate. The Senate is the upper chamber for a reason, so they did not hear that bill. There was a bill to remove the 3-day waiting period to purchase a gun. It was heard in the House, and again, it was not heard in the Senate. So all of the good bills on banning assault weapons and ensuring that we don't have guns in houses of worship, zoos, and public transportations and other sensitive locations, those bills were never heard. We had the opportunity to make a bad bill better, which is something that we work on. We can't always kill a bill. But as Senator Osgood explained, we work to try to improve provisions and remove harmful provisions where we can. One of the bills we were watching closely was House Bill 49, which was a child labor bill, and it was very distressing because it had the impact of disrupting work schedules for minors, which would have disrupted their school day and interrupted their educational process. So we were able to reduce some of the harm in this bill. As it passed, it allows minors 15 and under to work until 7 p.m. on school nights rather than up to 11 p.m. It permits 16 and 17-year-olds to work till 11 p.m. on school nights, and they can work up to 30 hours a week during the school year. It mandates breaks for minors who work 4 consecutive hours. The original bill did not require any breaks for minors. And this bill, however, does not apply to students who are homeschooled, students who are in a virtual school, or students who have exemptions for hardships. So we call it a win because we were able to remove some of the heinous provisions from that bill. We also followed a number of bills that impacted policing. You know that our democracy seems to be quickly slipping away, and every day I do get the feeling that we're moving toward more of a police state. We now have the election police who have some excessive powers, and we have the state guard that's well endowed with money and equipment. So this year, a bill was filed that would have created a voluntary auxiliary unpaid law enforcement unit, and they would have had statewide authority. We are pleased to say that bill did not get a hearing. There was a bill that was very concerning to everybody, and it regrettably passed. It was improved before it passed, but not what we really want. And this is the bill dealing with the civilian review boards. There are, I believe there were 21 locales that have civilian review boards. And they are important to our community because they are citizens who get a chance to review, to weigh in on, and talk about incidences of policing in our communities. We were told that we didn't really need to worry about anybody because when these instances of over-policing occur, well, we have the FDLE that can investigate, we have the Attorney General's office that can investigate, we have the Sheriff's office and the police departments and all their unions that can investigate. So as long as the fox is watching the hen house, we didn't have to be concerned about it. Well, we disagreed and continued to push the bill. It did pass, but rather than eliminate all civilian review boards, it allows the sheriffs or police chiefs to create a civilian review board but only for the purpose of reviewing the policies and procedures of that law enforcement office. You can no longer review and investigate specific instances of over-policing or harassing. And the review board can include up to 7 members, and at least one of those members has to be a retired law enforcement officer. We know that in some counties and municipalities, we may get 3 to 7, and all of them may be retired law enforcement officers. So this is a win, but only if it is constructed such that we would have real civilians participating. Senator Osgood?
Yeah, thank you. So I push a lot in Tallahassee. I believe that my words have to be impeccable. I want to be informed and I want to be knowledgeable. So going through the Citizen Review Board bill and talking about the investigative process and some of the conversations I had, and I'm not an attorney, who knows, maybe I'll go back to law school, but I know we have Judge Holmes and I know Ms. Burch-Fort, you're an attorney. So what was explained is that when you have an investigation going on, that those investigations have to be done by people that are in that discipline, that as a citizen with no police background, if I start interfering with an actual investigation, it could actually jeopardize the investigation. That's the first point. I was very happy about citizen reviews for policies, because what happens in government organizations is laws are made, and then whether it's the school board, the sheriff's office, the city, the county, additional policies are made. And sometimes those additional policies put things in place that when something is challenged because a policy is being fought, it's kind of like stand your ground. The way that it's put together, that's why police can kill us and get away with it, because the way that the law is crafted. A lot of human resource policies we don't pay attention to, and that's why we like diversity in a lot of incidents. But if you lawyers could spend just a few minutes explaining to me, if there is a bad cop and that cop is being investigated, what is that process, and at what point would it be appropriate for a citizen to intervene or have involvement? You know, I'm thinking about amendments and bills for next legislative session, but I want to make sure I have my facts straight.
Well,
I'll defer to you, Ms. Burch-Fort, and then I'll tell you about the Police and Criminal Justice Board that I serve on as the NAACP's representative in Broward County.
Well, that's one of the problems, Senator Osgood, is that we don't always know what that procedure is and what that policy process is, and how a citizen can actually insert themselves into such an investigation. You're often locked out of it because it is a process. Some of the information is not even public as they are going through that process. So we don't really have access to it. Sometimes families have access to what is actually happening inside of an investigation to a limited degree when they are well represented. And we have seen so many instances around the country where families immediately have to hire counsel for the purpose of trying to follow what the investigation entails. I have many conversations with Ben Crump, who we know is a part of a lot of these processes. And he speaks frequently of the frustrations of being shut out, and that families have to wait until investigations end. They have to hope they get the entire report and not a part of the report. So, you know, they're doing public records requests. They are interviewing people who were interviewed by a review board to try to find out whether the information that was presented to the board is actually reflected in the report. It is unsettling to know that the way citizen review boards could work in the past won't work that way this time. But I cannot tell you how a citizen would insert themselves into this process. It would all be after the fact, and it may well be their information may well be unverified.
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Burch-Fort. When people hear Citizens Review Board, I'll tell you why the legislation was proposed and pushed. Because Florida felt that it was not able to hire law enforcement officers, that police officers are resigning and retiring and leaving the state. And so they say it hindered municipalities and departments from hiring people. And I always think that citizens ought to be involved in the hiring of these people because many of them need psychological evaluations and we put a gun in their hand and a license to kill. In Broward, it's called the Police and Criminal Justice, I'll give you the name, the Broward County Police and Criminal Justice Review Board. In Dade County, they have a Citizens Review Board. The difference is, in Dade County, their review board would get the information and they make recommendations that will pretty much followed for officers to be fired after their review. In Broward County, when the commission passed the legislation, it made the board that I serve on a data collection and with the specific task to make recommendations to the county commission by a written report as to things that need to be changed. But it was just data collection. And we're having a difficult time getting the data from the directly from the, there are 31 municipalities. The Broward Sheriff's Office here in Broward covers a lot of those cities, but a lot of those cities are independent and they won't turn over things. My committee does not have subpoena authority. Everything has to be in writing and go before the board. But specifically, legally, when an officer is accused or thought to have done something wrong, you always hear about internal affairs. That's an in-house investigative review by the very department that the officer serves in. Okay, and after IA, as they call it, internal affairs, FDLE, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, when there's a police involved killing of an individual, they step in and handle the investigation. The problem with that is, again, you have law enforcement looking into law enforcement and you have to consider, is there a certain bias? A lot of people call it the blue code or whatever it's called, that law enforcement protects law enforcement. And then in Florida, you have Florida Statute 119, Florida 119, that exempts from public records requests the turning over of investigative documents and investigative materials, even when the public is saying, we want this, we want this, we want the body cam footage. As long as law enforcement certifies that it's an ongoing investigation under Florida Statute 119, they don't have to turn over anything. The problem then becomes when a family wants to file a lawsuit, they got to wait for all of these investigations to take place. And there's no statute of limitations on an investigation, but there's a statute of limitation as to when you can file a lawsuit. And so that's why they get lawyers right away to kind of step in and they file the lawsuit maybe a little bit prematurely, but they do it because if they don't, the time is going to run out and they'll be foreclosed forever from suing law enforcement. And then I'll put this ringer in there. We still have the concept of immunity, not absolute, but law enforcement officers are given a certain qualified, that's what they call it, qualified immunity when they're doing their job. And the reason why they were given that type of immunity is so that they would feel free in doing their job. But it was just a license to kill if you follow the history of qualified immunity. So the citizen review boards were just sort of like, officers, we're looking at you, we're going to be, asking questions, and maybe you shouldn't have your job. But Dade County had a very robust citizens review board. This legislation is going to just basically disband. If you thought DEI got killed, the citizens review board in Dade County suffered a fatal wound with this bill. What we do in Broward is not going to change, because all we do is collect data when they want to give it to us. So that's it in a nutshell. Ms. Burch-Fort, I'll turn it back to you.
Oh, we had one
Thank you.
question from one of our members. So they're saying, was legislation passed that eliminated civilian review boards in Florida?
They were not eliminated. Their role has been changed drastically. Those that had the authority to recommend firing of officers, retraining of officers, they can no longer do that. They don't have that authority.
Okay.
Ms. Burch-Fort, you're
Pamela?
on mute.
They can exist. They must be reported. They must be constructed and appointed by the sheriff or the police chief. They can be comprised of 3 to 7 members. One member must be a retired law enforcement officer, and they can only review policies and procedures of that office. That's as far as their authority extends. So yes, you can have a citizen review board, but it is not the citizen review boards that existed in the past.
And if
But
I
so,
could,
I
I
mean,
want to also address HB 49, because I don't always have, the germane perspective. I'm coming from 9.5 years on the school board. I will say to you guys that you probably would be amazed at the number of kids that work, the number of kids that work at 11 at night to 7 in the morning because they need money, their families need money. Children working and going to school is not anything new. If, we honest about it, we done got a little bougie now, but I remember my beta job at 14. I remember getting a job at Winn-Dixie and working those 20 hours a week, but you had to work up in Agnes Wade house and pay rent too, and still couldn't use the dryer, had to hang your clothes on the line. So when we hear different things about children working, I think what this bill challenges us to do is to pay better attention, to monitor when we're out in grocery stores and different places, that we're looking at children, we're engaging them. There are children that absolutely have to work and go to school. Some of our kids need the work experience so that immediately after high school, they can go from part-time to full-time. Now, I'm not for exploiting child labor, but I do think we have to pay attention to legislation, and we have to do our due diligence to know what's actually happening in communities and with our kids. I can say what I'm saying to you tonight, after spending 9.5 years on the school board, seeing children sleeping first hour and engaging them and say, why you always sleep? They say, well, I have to work. I work at Walmart from this time to this time. I'm hustling, I'm trying to do the right thing and go to school. And then that first hour needs to be the personalization period, because you might have to allow the child to sleep, during the personalization period so that they can get through school. With this bill coming forth, when we think about the whole school choice now, we have a lot more homeschool kids. Homeschool parents teach in 3 hours what the school system forced educators to teach in 6 hours. So they want those children to be able to go to work after they finish at a certain point to earn money and bring money in. We can't think just because families are wealthy that they're not requiring kids to work. And I had a lot of conversations, because that's kind of how I'm wired. I want to know reasons and what people's thinking are. And, then I want to be able to tell them how it's going to impact kids, that look like me. So when we think about where we are now with workforce shortages, We can also make an argument that a lot of people are leaving jobs, hospitality jobs, labor jobs. So if we start filling those jobs with kids, there needs to be some type of regulation, but we also need to pay the kids. So I'm saying that to add to the conversation that we have to pay attention to what's happening with our kids in the workforce. Now, there was also another bill that was a whole different bill that talked about 16 and 17-year-olds working on construction sites. I was a big yes on that bill. And the reason why I was a yes is because you have apprenticeship programs that allow 16 and 17-year-olds to work on construction sites, not on roofs, not on anything that's going to endanger them. But my support, I will be honest, was a very biased support and gender-related support. A lot of times those apprenticeship programs are the easiest and first opportunities that women get to work on construction sites. There are many girls that want to know the construction business, that want to be engineers and architects, and we are pushed out of that discipline and have to work twice as hard as anybody else. So with those apprenticeship programs operating through the school district, it gives the child gets credit for class. It's like being duly enrolled in another way. There's a major push for industry-based training and certification. So I want to just add that, to the conversation. When you're dealing with your legislator and they're voting a certain way, and y'all need to check and see how people are voting, engage in the conversation about the vote and why they're voting and what's in the bill. It's a lot. Sometimes the bill is 3 pages. Sometimes it's 300 pages. It's a lot dealing with legislation. So I just wanted to piggyback on those two things that Ms. Burch-Fort mentioned.
And I want
May I ask a quick question?
Go right ahead, Judge.
I didn't post this with the NAACP, but I was watching the bill. There was some speculation when the bill was first filed that because we are losing our migrant community due to our draconian immigration and overstepping into the federal field, that children will be put to work in the fields, cutting cane, sugar cane, picking beans, strawberries and blueberries, taking them out of school. And already it's a problem with migrant workers' children not being able to attend school regularly because of them moving around and working. So do you see any impact, Dr. Osgood, with children being exploited by taking up and being the replacements for the migrant workers who left this state because of immigration?
So most of our school districts, 80% of our school districts are predominantly made up of Black and brown kids and kids who are parents of immigrants, and that's a whole nother forum. I'm doing a forum in April around education, and I think I'm going to blow you guys' mind with some of the facts. When we get things like that, I didn't see any information. Sometimes someone will create a narrative and they'll just run with the narrative. And the narrative keep us from looking at the bill and what's actually going on in the bill. There are a lot of people that have left. If they're immigrants and they have children, they're going to take those children with them. I didn't see any push for that. I do think from my perspective in conversations, it's more about homeschool kids being able to work and earn money. We know that we've always had exploitation of children, in labor, or exploitation of people in labor. That is the culture of America, whether, it's slavery, whether the way that women still earn 30 cents less, no pun intended, Mr. Brown, but it's the truth, 30 cents less on the dollar than a man working the same job, and the woman is more qualified. So this issue of exploiting labor is an issue that has been the culture of America. And I think we have to continue to monitor it and address it. Sometimes, Judge Holmes, we give a lot more credit to people that don't look like us. They're thinking about us, but not as much as we think that they are, because some kind of way, racism, which is the biggest sin, have allowed them to dehumanize us or to put us on a lower level. So when they're making decisions, people in that sphere that have power, that small little group of, elite white guys, they're making it in a very narcissistic way. It's about their personal gain, their generational wealth, how they're gonna, take a business now, preempt local government where you can't have local preference in government decision-making and contracts, meaning that if you're using state dollars, you can't split projects for local businesses to get part of those projects. If a business has to be bonded at $30 million, a lot of small businesses can't do that. So you used to be able to pull out the roof for some part of the work and make it a $2 million project that they could get bonded because they were going to hire the local people from the community, which stimulates the money in the community. Now you can't do that. And then in 2 years, that person will be able to start working for you. Instead of making $25 or $35 an hour like they're doing now, you can pay them $15 an hour. That's so that the business owner can make more money, or the business model can work better to the advantage for the business. So that's some of the conversations and the way that some people are thinking when they're making these policies. It's about their agenda, money, and where the money is going. And let me just be clear, it's not illegal money. Because if you can set the rules up in that way and the rules are followed, it's not illegal money, but it is exploiting people. When anytime you think a person's salary should be reduced, people should work and they shouldn't get, adequate pay for their labor.
Let me say real quick, there was one, we get about 15 minutes left or so. So what was the bill that I think Pamela, you and I spoke about it. Dr. Osgood, you and I spoke about Judge Holmes, the one that changed the way that we see juvenile justice circuit advisory boards, that basically has taken the control, any control, local community control, out of the advisory boards and put it back into DJJ. So we know that DJJ's employees are not going to say anything negative and will certainly not address the issue. And so both, in full disclosure, both Dr. Osgood, Judge Holmes, and I currently serve on hours. We will until July 1. And then there will put people who talk less and who don't expose all of their lies on that on the Juvenile Justice Advisory Board. And I believe in my heart of hearts that the rules are put into place because Broward's Circuit 17 Advisory Board made sure that the children were treated correctly, and those that weren't, we call them out in every way possible. We've done some really good work over the course of, whether it had to do with school-based arrest, whether it had to do with civil citation, whether it had to do with treatment of our children in our regional detention center. So I would talk a little bit about that bill, or those bills, and the final form of it. We'll start with you, Pamela, please.
I was going to punt to Senator Osgood because I know she sits on she will for a period of time continue to sit on your board. And I know that she followed that very closely.
So it's a whole crazy perspective. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't as actively all over this bill because I had my hands full and was losing sleep at night with HB 1181, this other juvenile justice bill around firearms, which I'll get to in just a moment. But there is this thought that the Department of Juvenile Justice is best for our kids, that if we keep them there, we can put wraparound services and we can help them, and they're going to do so much better after they spend 6 months to a year in the Department of Juvenile Justice with mental health services and wraparound services and yada, 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 yada. So you see a lot of legislation, this legislative session, around that thought, to include Bill 1181 that says if a child get caught with a gun for the first time, the first alliteration of that bill said that it would go, a first degree misdemeanor will be changed to like a second or third degree felony. And we were able to fight it and change that because there are innocent kids who take a gun for show and tell. They're not trying to kill nobody, and they shouldn't be a felon. But that thought led a lot of bills. So the final format of that bill is the executive director of the Department of Juvenile Justice, I think it is, will appoint people to the juvenile justice review boards, which mean that they will appoint the people that they want on those juvenile justice review boards. And when you're in any capacity as a citizen or serving on boards, you're not there to rubber stamp stuff. We have to collectively identify problems and solve problems. So I think that this was an attempt to get boards like ours out of the loop and pushing back on different things. But I also think it's an opportunity for us. We know that we have the Department of Juvenile Justice right here off of Broward and I-95. Many of you on the Zoom might not even know it's there. It is disgusting. You can smell the urine when you get out your car. I used to have a lot of problems as a school board member with that facility. Madam President, you know, we've had to go in there during COVID to make sure that the children had masks. The good thing is now, as your state senator, I can go in anytime I want now. We don't have to go through all these clearances that we had before. But we have to pay attention to the Department of Juvenile Justice, how long they're keeping our kids, what's happening to our kids, because a lot of our kids go to the Department of Juvenile Justice and they have a lot of conversations and they get released knowing some stuff that they didn't know when they first went there. But I think this is an area that we all can level up in our communities. We can't just throw a kid away because they get arrested, they make a bad choice or decision. And our board has been very diligent about that, just trying to get data from the Department of Juvenile Justice staff. So, Madam President, I say if they're disbanding the board, we are taxpaying citizens. So we need to regroup with our committee and we need to up our ante. Now we can ask questions. We don't have to operate within a structure. We can really, you know, bring attention to things. And when people don't give us information, then we can push our legislators or those of us that are in legislative office to weigh in on other levels. But we cannot just accept because people are getting rid of committees that we know are working, that we're going to just let it go. We're not that group of people. So we're going to find a way to work together to address it. But that is kind of the thought. If they're in the department, if we keep them in the Department of Juvenile Justice for 6 months to a year in a residential program, we can help get them back on track and give them wraparound services. And my response was, I don't trust the Department of Juvenile Justice. I trust my community. There are community-based organizations and churches and groups that are been in place for years, months, and Sundays to help kids. We don't need them detained in a facility, an unclean, unhealthy facility, talking about helping them turning their life around. It takes a community to do that. So I was not happy with that bill. I wasn't as vocal because I was trying to work really hard to not have a little child, you know, takes a gun to school for show and tell, get a felony instead of a misdemeanor or another chance. And we were able to work really hard on that particular bill. It did pass, but that language was taken out, you know, of that bill.
And thank you. We agree. And so you will hear it here first that we will, we have, the executive committee has voted to and will form our NAACP Criminal Justice / Juvenile Justice Task Force. And so we created the strategic plan for that board here in Broward. And so we will just continue on. We have members who serve in high places and who will have access, such as you and Senator Representative Campbell and others who work to go into those facilities. And those of you who are from other circuits, I would advise you to do the same, because that sounds really good. Wraparound services. It ain't no wraparound services happening. And I know that the facility here in Broward is a lot older, but my grandmother used to say, just because it's something old doesn't mean it can't be clean. And so it should be the children. They've also tampered with the educational requirements as well. And the chair became the circuit's chief juvenile probation officer here. So nothing good comes of that. And let's see, I think, Judge, there are House Bill 1425 says, Judge Holmes, there are a number of concerns directed to you from Ms. Valerie Brant Wilson. Senator, go right ahead.
Thank you. I just want to give this data because it was somewhat eye-opening to me. In the end of February, I had a conversation with our supervisor of election who is trying to get out and educate. I'm a data, driven person. So I just want to drop this data for your hearing. At the end of February in Broward County, 1,142 Democrats have changed to the Republican Party. 127 Republicans have changed to the Democratic Party. 605 MPAs have changed to the Democratic Party. 1,387 MPAs have changed to the Republican Party. 414 Republicans have changed to the MPA party. And 1,275 Democrats have changed to the MPA party. So when we think about where we are in this political climate, and I know the NAACP is a nonpartisan organization, people are not happy with neither three political parties. But what we have to do is focus our attention on human beings and be intentional about electing people that's going to prioritize people. If we're able to prioritize people, it helps us in our decision making. And we know that when people make policy, the policy represents their values. So if you think that African American history has no value, then just imagine how you feel about African American people when you're making your decision if you declare that their history has no value. But I think that we're in a time now where we can't use the excuse that our votes don't matter, that we have to speak with our voice and our votes, or we will continue to get these horrific consequences that we're getting now. And we have to look very thoroughly at people who come and talk to us that look like us, at how they're voting. And we're not going to always agree, but we should always be able to have a conversation and be able to talk to each other to make sure that we're keeping our focus on people. Right now, I have to say this, Marcia, I can't let this Zoom in without saying it. There is no outrage to help Haiti right now.
Right.
From President Biden or Governor DeSantis. We help Ukraine, we help Israel, but we're not in an outcry about helping Haiti. We're sending military troops to Key West to arrest women and children that are literally running for their lives. Why not send those troops to Haiti to deal with those gangs that have taken over the country? And I'm trying hard not to come to the conclusion that it's because Haiti was the first place to revolt against slavery or because the people that are fleeing for their lives are Black people. So I find myself with my back against the wall asking my colleagues, both Democrat and Republican, and those in the federal government that are inside my political party, is it justice or is it just us? To me, it seems like it's just us when things happen, that we're not consistent in no party as to how we address it. We help Ukraine, we help Israel, but I don't see that outpour for Haiti.
Agreed. And let me just tell you what, before you do it, Pamela, real quick, I wanted to let you know who all you are. So we've been talking to Order of Eastern Stars, particularly Golden Victor number 44. I see Alpha Phi Alpha. I see Alpha Alpha Kappa Alpha. I see Zeta Phi Beta sorority, Delta Sigma Theta. I see the Shriners. I see law enforcement, and I see elected officials on this call. And so we have members everywhere who want to be in the know as to what's happening and work on solutions. Pamela Burch-Fort, go right ahead, ma'am.
I just wanted to tag in off Senator Osgood that we should be vigilant. The governor has hinted that he may reconvene the legislature in special session to further discuss Haiti. I don't think it would be necessarily from a helpful point of view, but he indicated that he is looking at other measures to continue to send our state guard, our National Guard. I believe we have FDLE and Highway Patrol troopers in Key West stationed at the border. Anytime the legislature convenes, we all have to hold our breath because it could extend beyond what we think the call of the legislature is, since they can change it once they convene. So everyone should remain vigilant and continue to lean in to try and get a better result and better action as it relates to Haiti.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to also add that Kappa Alpha Psi, I apologize, Brother Palmar, for not mentioning it. I also didn't mention the links. I apologize, Dr. Jackson, as well. And also, which I believe those questions are for the senator from Valerie Brandt Wilson, president of One Voice Florida. So we want to make sure that if you can just look at a couple of them, maybe give us 5 minutes, Doc, on a couple of her questions. I think she's
Yes, certainly. She's talking about introducing bills to have people who want to enter law enforcement have at least 2 years of college. It's a recommendation that she has, and I certainly will follow up with her and do the due diligence to look into that. If others have bill ideas, please reach out to my office or to me. Now is the time. It allows me to do the adequate research to look at, if it's something that we can move forward in the best way to moving it forward. And I think this is the posture that we're going to have to take when these things come forth. When we start recommending bills and legislation that's coming from our community, it's going to get people's attention. And I think this is what we have to do moving forward. So I responded to the questions that I see from her. I'll reach out to Valerie. She's the president of One Voice Florida, which is a new organization that's kind of rebranded to promote the issues and support Black women and issues that pertain to Black women and Black people in Florida. And so please look out for the information from that organization. Also, you can reach my Senate office at 954-321-2705. And I want to recognize my Chief Legislative Aide, Julie Fishman, who does a great job. I just have an incredible staff that I am so grateful for. And Marcia, we also have your buddy that was with you praying for you at the Night of the Black Judges, Sister Patricia Carter, on with us tonight.
That is true. That is true. And I see what you're from. I believe she's from Miami, Vanessa, as well, who is always on and always in the know as well. Let's hear from President Anthony Brown, who is in Indian River. He does not, unfortunately for him, does not have anything close to a Senator Osgood. He got little to no help.
He
He
does.
is this getting in advice, particularly in education. So I know that he's always looking for help and ideas, and certainly motivation to keep things under control in Indian River County. President Brown.
Thank you, Madam President. I had wrote a little note. I'm blessed because of your webinars and our relationship with Senator Osgood and some of the other senators and representatives that you've allowed me to befriend, and Attorney Pamela Burch-Fort. We are blessed in Indian River County because we are isolated, but we have access, and access is very important. And one of the things is with HB 1181, Marcia and I had talked, and we have started a group. It's called Sentinels of Hope, a diversity and advocacy program for our youth, protecting our youth, and we are running forward because we want to intervene on their behalf. Part of it is the prison, school to prison pipeline, mass incarceration. We are orchestrating it to be strong and help our children, because in Indian River County, it is crazy. But when Madam President Ellison hooked me up with HB 1181 coming from you, Senator Osgood, it set our feet to rolling. And I'm just want to say thank you. The educational process, I met with a school board member. Moms for Liberty is losing their power. But one of the things that I want to bring to the table, you ladies brought forth the process and insight. Now it's incumbent upon us to take our heads out of the sand, come together, form any and all kind of coalitions we can to fight this monster in the state of Florida. And also, I'm upset with what they're doing with Haiti, because you're sending troops to Haiti to protect the embassy. You're sending police and troops to the borders to keep Haitians out, and we're sitting quietly like hostages with our heads in the sand. But thank you, Madam President, for allowing me and Indian River County to be a part of what you're doing.
Thank you so much. And we'll do a closing, starting with Attorney Pamela Burch-Fort.
Thank you, Madam President, for inviting me here. As everyone has said, these are very necessary forums that we should have. And I am pleased that you do this frequently. I'm hoping that you will continue to invite us to participate so that we can educate, communicate, and discuss these issues with our members. But more than anything, I look forward to seeing you all in Tallahassee. I look forward to working with you on establishing Lobby Day, and something that we can look forward to every legislative session. We're on the move, and what we know is when we fight, we win.
Thank you so much. Senator Osgood.
Certainly, and I'm going to continue to be repetitive. Romans 1:18 says the wrath of God is against ungodliness, unrighteousness, and men who suppress the truth. We must continue to have these forums so that the truth will be known, and we must not let anyone indoctrinate us to think that diversity, equity, and inclusion are curse words. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a pathway from unrighteousness to righteousness. And we must keep living it and talking about it and demanding it. We must understand that our progress is not permanent, but we have a voice, we have a vote, and we have to be willing to put everything on the line. Suffering and sacrifice is the price we pay for freedom. I'm willing to go for broke, and I need y'all to stand with me and do the same thing, because our children and our grandchildren, our nieces, our nephews, the little boys and girls that see us in church, see us on TV, see us on social media, they deserve better.
Thank you, Doug. And so we want to let you know that if there should be no doubt, but in case there is, we are standing on business, both in Indian River. I'm sure I don't purport to speak for you, but I'm sure that President Brown would agree, and Fort Lauderdale, Broward as well. We will certainly, we're talking about next session, I'm sure, but we do have some very important elections, primary elections coming up. So we are going to be sharing and getting other information that as we go along to make sure that we do everything we can to turn out the vote here. You're not the only one that's looking sideways at both parties as well. As we go around in the news, all is not well. I'll just say that all is not well.
Not
And so
well.
we want to make sure that we get our people out and get them knowledgeable, because somewhere I read that the people perish from lack of knowledge. I want to say I am deliciously proud to have Miss Pat Carter on here. She is my new prayer buddy. She roughed me up a little bit, but I loved every second of it. Some really good pictures as well. And with that, we're gonna close. Judge Holmes, if you will close us out with prayer, please.
You don't want me to defer to the one that can get away with calling you a heathen?
She did call me. She did, and she can get away with it every day. I love me some her.
I am very happy that Dr. Pat Carter is on here. It does me good. And I thank the NAACP for allowing me to be a part of these forums. And it is in the Bible that the people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. So thank the NAACP for knowledge. Let us pray. Father, we thank you for this forum tonight. We thank you for those who participated. God, we pray your special blessings upon Senator Osgood and Attorney Pamela Burch-Fort as they fight the good fight of faith and get that legislation that we so sorely need. But God, now it is in our court. It is incumbent upon those of us that hear it, those of us that read it, that we must take action. And you told us, if my people who are called by my name would humble themselves and pray, turn from their wicked ways and seek my face, then you would hear from heaven, you'd forgive our sins, and you would heal our land. Our land needs healing, and God, with this equipped knowledge that we have, that is the start of the healing. Go with us, stand by us, keep us strong. God, I ask you now for special prayer for our presidents who are on this line tonight, President Marsha Ellison, President Anthony Brown. Keep them strong, keep them in the center of your will. And then, Satan, we serve you notice that no weapon that is formed against us will ever prosper. And every tongue that rises in judgment against us is condemned. This is God's will for his people. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. And good night.
Amen.
Those of you who have not joined the NAACP or have not renewed, the only thing missing from the struggle is you. Please make sure you do so. You can do so by going to our website at naacpftlbroward.com. That's naacpftlbroward.com. And have a good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care.